If you've gotten coffee in the last year, odds are the barista has flipped around a little iPad where you can select how much to tip her. And oftentimes, the lowest option is well above the 15% norm that we used to be accustomed to. And even if you just got a muffin, you are expected to tip sometimes $2 for a $3 pastry. Believe it or not, there's a reason all this is happening, and it's not great. And we're about to find out just why on a new series called Money Problems, where we figure out why money problems are happening. Tipping frustration has gone through the roof in recent years. A quick Google search reveals hundreds of articles recounting shock and outrage over tipping policies and price increases since the beginning of the pandemic. It used to be that you tip waiters and you tip doormen, but now it has spread to coffee shops, pizza shops, anywhere with a cash register. And while tipping is unavoidable in certain circumstances, consumers feel that you should not need to tip someone for simply doing their job. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Well, no, not exactly. You see, there is a reason that workers have started asking for tips, and the root of the problem lies in inflation. Inflation causes the prices of everything to rise, and normally we shoot for an average inflation rate of around 2% each year, and that's considered healthy. However, over the last 2 years, food prices have risen by around 24%. And rent has risen by around 30%. So you're thinking, wages have risen to keep up with inflation, right? Well, actually, no, and they probably won't. And that's the problem. For the majority of workers, wages have hardly budged since 1980, while inflation has soared. And in the last 2 years alone, inflation of real goods has outpaced wages by 30%. That means if you were making $100,000 in 2019 and your primary expenses were food, rent, and gas, that same $100,000 salary is as good as $70,000 was back in 2019. Despite the rapidly rising cost of living across the United States, employers have struggled and been resistant to give their employees raises to match. Studies show that fewer than 25% of employers are considering inflation-based raises. So if you're thinking that because inflation has gone up that you'll surely get a raise, sorry to burst your bubble, but that usually doesn't happen. And for service workers, this especially doesn't happen. They have not received a raise since inflation has gone up. So instead of employers paying service workers more, they pass the burden on to consumers. Well, there we go. Problem solved, right? Well, not so fast. If service workers require more tips to compensate for a higher cost of living that their salary does not provide, then the people providing those tips are also working at a job that does not provide the necessary salary to live. So we have the people who are least capable of compensating workers tasked with subsidizing their wages. Confusing, isn't it? It's like one big circle where consumers allocate money amongst themselves. People without a lot of money are forced to tip workers who are in turn forced to tip other workers because their employers refuse to pay them an adequate wage. As you can imagine, this system does not accomplish anything. This becomes even more frustrating when corporations use tipping programs as a form of publicity. For Christmas on 2022, Amazon implemented a program where consumers could tip their last mile delivery drivers for the holidays. This announcement came on the same day that Amazon got sued for tip fraud allegations. The lawsuit accuses Amazon of stealing tips from its drivers and tricking customers into thinking the tips were going to workers. As for the new Christmas tipping program itself, this is yet another instance of consumers subsidizing wages for employers who simply refuse to cut into their executive profits. Last mile delivery drivers are notoriously overworked and underpaid, with common reports of drivers having to urinate in bottles just to meet demanding delivery quotas or risk losing their job. Meanwhile, the average executive salary in the logistics industry boasts well over $1 million each year. Corporations using the public to subsidize their employees' wages is nothing new. In fact, Walmart has been doing it for the past decade and a half. This is actually so notorious that there have been studies done about it. According to one such study, the Walton family and Walmart benefit about $7.8 billion each year due to tax breaks and taxpayer subsidies. So what does that really mean? Some employees at Walmart are considered low-wage employees, so they receive things like food stamps, subsidized housing, Medicaid, and economic development subsidies.
Just because they are the wealthiest family in this country, you tell me that you think it's right that their workers are supported by taxpayers in this country in terms of Medicaid, food stamps, because they're not paying a living wage. Do you think that's right?
While these subsidies don't come out of your pockets directly like tipping does, they do come from your paycheck in the form of taxes. So believe it or not, your taxes actually go to supporting low-wage Walmart employees, which in turn makes Walmart shareholders wealthier because they do not need to pay their employees more and instead can take the profit for themselves. To circle back to the tipping conversation, tipping fatigue is having an outsized negative impact on workers who are paid in what is called the sub-minimum wage. This refers to the minimum wage for employees who are primarily paid in tips, like waiters and bartenders, the wages primarily determined at the state level. Some states like North Carolina have a $2.13 sub-minimum wage salary, while other states like California have the same sub-minimum wage as they do actual minimum wage, which is $15. And when you think about it, the problem makes a lot of sense. If consumers are constantly asked for tips in every shop they go in, eventually they're going to stop being so generous in tipping, and they don't necessarily differentiate the sub-minimum wage workers from the minimum wage workers, meaning that the rise of tipping norms at coffee shops and other shops like bodegas are directly decreasing the earnings of waiters. So how do we fix this? Ironically, the solution is to stop tipping at all these places where you didn't normally need to tip before. If employees can't make a living wage at their employer, then they will be forced to look for work elsewhere. As a result, there will be increased competition in the labor market, forcing employers to increase salaries across the board. This will have the effect of not only curing the tipping fatigue problem, but lower income individuals will see their net worth rise now that their wages accurately reflect the rising cost of living in America. Additionally, the payments will come from the owners of these companies, not from consumers like you and me. So instead of consumers simply moving money amidst each other, there will now be an outflow of capital from shareholders to the workers, which helps to alleviate another problem, which is great wealth and income inequality, which at this point in America is greater than the heights of the French Revolution. And on that topic, it's important to remember that corporate profits are the highest they've been in 70 years. So it's not like these corporations who are subsidizing their employees' wages on consumer or tipping. It's not like they're actually hurting for cash. It's simply that it's very easy for them to do, there's no one preventing them from doing it, and it makes them money. And you should not expect them to ease up anytime soon. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and watch the other videos on the channel.